Reparation H was asked about Xi's spy balloon, and she offered this trenchant analysis of the shoot down. You know, we we shot it down because it
They were
needed to be
invading
shot
our space.
because it needed to be shot down. Huh. Tautologies are her strong suit, along with Venn diagrams.
Why shoot first when we didn't have a policy in place?
Well, let's be clear, first of all, as it relates to the Chinese balloon, we shot it down because it needed to be shot down because...
Exactly. We did it because we did it.
And it needed to be done.
Don't worry about the relationship, though. This is a blip, but at least with respect to Kamala, her perspective on the Chi-Coms hasn't changed.
The perspective that we have in terms of what should be the relationship between China and the United States, that is not going to change, but surely and certainly that balloon was not helpful, which is why we shot it down.
Mm-hmm. Tough talk. Tony Blinken had a confab with the Chi-Coms top diplomat in Munich. Topic of the spy balloon did come up.
In Munich, too, what we know is we are not the only ones on the receiving end of the Chinese spy balloons. More than 40 countries have had these balloons go over their territory, and this goes back some years. This program's been around for a few years. So there's a real concern that I'm hearing here from other countries, from allies and partners alike, about this program. And I think countries are, I was going to say pleased, but pleased is the wrong word. They appreciate the fact that we've exposed it.
I will assume you got no apology.
Again, don't want to characterize what he said, but you're correct.
Yeah. Well, it's a
They're
relationship,
expecting
though.
one?
The perspective doesn't change, but that doesn't help. You need to apologize so we can, get along in a competitive but non-conflictual manner. Blinken also asked by Martha Raddatz on This Week, who you just heard chime in there, if China is planning on providing Russia lethal aid to support their invasion of Ukraine, and what the Biden administration may or may not do about that if it comes to pass.
Significant support to Russia in its aggression. We've been watching this very, very closely. And for the most part, China has been engaged in providing rhetorical, political, diplomatic support to Russia. But we have information that gives us concern that they are considering providing lethal support to Russia in the war against Ukraine. And it was important for me to share very clearly with Wang Yi that this would be a serious problem.
And Mr.
Serious problem. That's tough
talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking
boy,
the same thing, Dan.
I'm sure the Chi-Coms are shaking in their boots. For more on this, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano joins us, VP of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of the book Brutal War, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea, 1942. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Well, I was invited to the Munich Security Conference, but I didn't go because I kind of thought it was a waste of time.
Well, hey, Jim, we can't, Jim, we're having trouble hearing you.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
So why didn't you go to the conference?
Because I thought it was a waste of time, and I kind of think I was right.
You apparently didn't hear Kamala Harris's speech. That was seminal. That was Gorbachev tear down this wall quality.
Look, I mean, I've said this before. I think the Chinese pay attention to what we do, not what we say. And the problem is when we have this very equivocal talk with the Chinese, we are sending this incredibly mixed message, which was, will the U.S. protect its interests or it's not? And this is incredibly dangerous. This is what got us into the Korean War, when the U.S. literally sent the strong signal that, we're really not going to defend Korea. And then, of course, the North Koreans invaded. We woke up the next morning and Truman says, no, we really are going to defend Korea. This is what got us into the war in Ukraine, when we ran away from Afghanistan. And then the administration literally for a year was sending a signal to the Russians that, look, Ukraine's not on our agenda. We really don't care about Europe. And then they invade and they go, no, we really do care about Europe. And then we put 44 million people's lives at risk. So when we can't articulate clearly what our physical actions are going to be. It's us that's creating instability and inviting aggression, not the Chinese.
So what do you think
the Chinese are just the Chinese?
What do you think the Chi-Coms are doing here with the spy balloon, with the making overtures to Russia? Or at least that's what Blinken says. They're picking up overtures to Russia about providing lethal aid to their war effort. Is this trying to feel out where America is and what America may do depending on what China does? Is that all that is at this point?
So the balloon one I feel pretty confident about, because if you look at where it went, the kind of intelligence it had on it, and it seems pretty clear that this was an effort to fill in a gap in the Chinese ability to target our early warning system, our nuclear missiles, and the command and control facilities. You can have a satellite in space, but the satellite's only over America for a couple of minutes a day, and it can take exquisite pictures, but you can't see everything with a picture, and of course we cover stuff up. So signal intelligence is a great way to get that data. You fly at altitude, you have no line of sight problems, and which is why actually, when I said, well, we found other balloons, I thought, well, it would make sense that if they were going to do this, they would send multiple balloons at multiple altitudes with different configurations, because once we get onto this, it's probably not something they can do again. So that was a nuclear targeting effort. I don't know why we just don't come out and say that. As for what the Chinese are going to do in Russia, the Chinese are always risk averse when it comes to helping somebody else. The Chinese will likely never do anything. They'll do anything for the Russians they can that they can't be held accountable for. The Chinese were all in for the Russians to invade Ukraine because that would be great for them. It would be a Europe that would be destabilized, distracted, disorganized, divided, and that would be great space for the Chinese to move in. But having said that, once it was very clear that this invasion was not going well, the Chinese have not lifted a finger really to help the Russians, other than what? Buy the oil, right? And they're happy to buy cheap oil for them at below market prices, and gas, well, not gas, oil, because that's for them. But would the Chinese really lift a finger to overtly help the Russians? We haven't seen that. So I don't know what's going on with that conversation between.
What if they did?
Look, here's the problem: did we kind of invent this to pretend like we're looking tough against the Chinese? We warned the Chinese, and they're backing down. And the Chinese, maybe they were just telling that to the Russians because they'll tell the Russians anything but not actually do anything. Maybe it never really happened, and our intel's bad. Who knows?
Well, I want to go.
It's hard to read a lot into this.
Yeah, real quick, just wanted to go back to the Chinese spy balloons. Have they been doing this for years? Because, excuse me, I keep hearing multiple reports that they were flying these spy balloons when Trump was in office. And is there any truth to that? Because if it was, why didn't the public know about it?
Here's what there's no truth of.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, and the other thing, again, kind of reading between the lines, but they briefed former U.S. officials, including John Radcliffe, who is the head of the director of national intelligence. And if you read Radcliffe's statement, which was, I had this secret briefing, I'm not going to tell you what's in the briefing, but none of this contradicts my previous views, which is that there's no evidence that a balloon ever traversed the United States. Now, you want to fly a spy balloon outside of U.S. territory, that's perfectly legal. So this is one of these things where it's a lie, but, you've had balloons before. Well, nobody said the question. So you have evidence that under the Trump administration, a Chinese spy balloon traversed our entire nuclear infrastructure? You have evidence of that? Nobody's ever asked that question because I think the answer to that, according to every senior U.S. official that I talk to, is no.
What is your threat assessment on the Northern Illinois Bottle Cap Balloon Brigade?
Does he know about it?
Well,
that hobby club that's very sinister.
Hobby club is the front. Yeah.
Don't laugh. I don't know which is worse. The fact that we had, we thought we had 4 Chinese spy balloons, or the fact that we cannot distinguish between a spy balloon and. So here's the thing: if you actually listen,
maybe they're working with the
It's
Chinese,
the
Northern Illinois
if you
Bottle Cap
listen
Balloon
to
Brigade.
the recording of the F-16 pilots, it's very clear that what they are describing is not a balloon, is not an intelligence collection asset. right? They're flying around this balloon. It's got a funny shape. Some cables hanging out. There's no wires. There's no antennas. It's not emitting any signals. It's not piloted. So it's very clear we were just randomly shooting around balloons because we didn't want to be criticized because, oh my God, maybe there's another Chinese balloon and we'll miss it.
Hey, listen, Jim, that's the policy. We shoot down all balloons and let God sort them out. You know, hey.
Well, look, 20 years, over 20 years ago on 9/11, we lost control of our airspace and we had 3,000 people killed. And we ran around. We created the Department of Homeland Security. We created NORTHCOM. The FBI said, combating terrorism is our number one mission. And what do we have today? We apparently can't control our own airspace. We have a massive disaster in the middle of the country, and apparently the U.S. government can't really be really excited about responding to it. We have a border that's completely uncontrolled. So in every vital aspect of what we agreed to do after 9/11, we are worse at that today than we were over 20 years ago.
I'm thinking that we should.
Under Joe Biden, our homeland is less safe today than it was on 9/11. So
I'm thinking we should. I'm thinking we should ban kids' birthday parties because you get balloons, you get a Mylar balloon that's released. Those things are indestructible, and we're spending $400,000 per missile to shoot those things down. What do you think?
Thank God we got through Valentine's Day, right?
Yeah, right. All right, serious.
I mean, we buy these for our grandson, and these things are indestructible. They float forever.
I know.
People are worried about our arsenal of weapons because of stuff we're sending to Ukraine. We're going to burn that through just going after balloons.
Going after balloons, yeah. Well, this is where everybody's got to do their part, cut down on the balloon consumption at the local level. Think act local, think globally, act locally, or something like that.
It'd be funny if it wasn't so unbelievably ridiculous.
Serious question here. Holman Jenkins writing about Putin. Putin has no plan to win, he argues, and he also argues that since the catastrophic collapse of his initial plan, the West's cautious approach has in a way actually made the war safe for the Russian president. It's easy for him to sort of continue on now and impose the carnage on his people and the Ukrainian people, and perhaps with a wink and a nod or more from the Chi-Coms. I mean, what's your assessment of that assessment that, number one, there's no plan to win and there's no path for him to, quote-unquote, win, but number two, the cautious approach of the West is providing more operating room for Putin?
Well, I'm not going to comment on an article I haven't read, but I will say that it is, I think, and again, when we say these things, we're not speaking with the voice of God here. I mean, we're basing it on an assessment of what we know, most of it gleaned through, all of it gleaned through unclassified intelligence, and I'm talking to our friends in Europe who are right next to the war and other folks. Russia doesn't have the combat power to do any more than at best consolidate control of the regions that it already has, if it can do that. So the question is Putin fighting a war he cannot win? If win is conquering Ukraine, the answer is yes. And the other thing that's true, which is every day that Putin fights, his conventional forces that he has to threaten his neighbors and other countries is bigger than the day it was before. So that's true. And if the other question is if we had flowed aid to Ukraine before the war, could we have actually prevented the war? The answer is probably. And if we had flowed aid faster, could the Ukrainians have got us to the place we are right now, which is to do faster? And the answer is probably. So I do think that and I'm not saying it's all the West. I think Biden has been an atrocious war president, but I'm not saying it's all the West's fault. So, for example, if you're going to get off Russian gas, that takes more than 5 minutes, right? But the fact that people did dither in the beginning, and you have to understand, this is what military people want to believe. Hitler wanted to believe the war could still be won. The Japanese wanted to believe the war could still be won. Part of the reason why we adopted the total surrender thing was to show these guys, dude, we are so freaking serious about winning this thing. And you've got to send really powerful messages like that to the other guy if you want the other guy to stop. It's particularly in a war which is really optional for them. But remember, not to make equivocal, because weren't invading a country when we were fighting in Vietnam, and we weren't invading a country when we were fighting in Korea. We went in to help them to somebody else. We stayed in an unwinnable war in Vietnam for 25 years. The Russians stayed in Afghanistan for a really long time. So when people are determined to do these things, they can fight for a really long time. But I got to tell you, this is one of the ironies here, which is, we can all people have different views on war, and I get all that. But where are we today in terms of our interests in Europe? We are facing a much much less Russian conventional military threat than we were before, to the point where the U.S. military footprint in NATO doesn't need to be near what it was. So our requirements of what we need to do in Europe have actually declined quite a bit, I think, when this war is in. Our allies are actually standing up and doing more. Some allies are actually spending more than us as a percentage of GDP on defense. Europe is on a path to being completely energy independent of the Russians. Many European countries are much more sensible about oil and gas than they were 2 years ago. Many of the countries in Europe are center-right governments now, which are much more pro-yes, much more anti-China, much more anti-Russian, really want to work with the United States and totally get the concept of burden sharing, and are much better friends to the United States than traditional allies like Germany and France. We're actually in a stronger position now. Don't get me wrong. I think Joe Biden's a yahoo. I think he's been a horrible, terrible president. But the problem is the blessing of God is Putin has been way worse at fighting this war than Joe Biden, which is a low bar, I grant you.
Yeah, no, he is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano. By the way, a happy anniversary to your employer, the Heritage Foundation, 50-year anniversary.
Thank you very much. I don't feel a day over 45. But
and you don't look it either. Jim Carafano, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. Wealth Health Radio.
The biggest fears that people have is, do I have enough money to retire?
Retirement doesn't have to be complicated.
To make sure that you're going through retirement with confidence.
Learn principles of income planning.
There's a lot of different facets that you need to take into consideration when you're retiring.
Tune into Wealth Health Radio with Joe Murphy, noon to 1 p.m. Sundays on AM 560. The Answer.
Join the Chicago Wolves